Hey everybody, this is James Mahoney from Black Lobster Academy. In the last episode we covered the basics of making selections. This is episode 5 of my Intro to Photoshop series designed to support my digital illustration course offered at Black Lobster Academy. In this episode we're taking a look at the powerful feature of layers in Photoshop. I believe that layers is the most important aspect of digital media creation for the artist. It's empowered artists more than anything else I can think of. There's a lot of material here, so let's jump in and crank it. Using layers. Layers can be found in its own panel. If it's not open, you can open it from Windows, Layers, or use F7. What you see is a stack of individual layers. Naturally, the top layers obscure and are in front of the bottom layers. It's a stack. Like the other panels in Photoshop, you can access a panel-specific menu from the upper right corner. Hit Escape to close the menu. Right-click on the layer to access a layer-specific menu. Right-click on the layer thumbnail to get a slightly different menu. The layers have buttons above and below, and I'll cover what the main ones do. There are a few ways to create a new layer. You can use this button here to create a new layer above the one you're on, or you can use Shift, Option, Command, and N key to create a new layer. Get in the habit of naming your layers by using the Shift Command N key to get the new layer dialog. You can also change the name of a layer by double-clicking on the name. So now with the layer selected, whatever you do will affect that layer. You can toggle the layer's visibility with this eye icon to the left of the layer thumbnail. If you hold down the Option key and click on that eye icon, you can see the layer in isolation. Option-click it again to get back. You can adjust the transparency of the layer by changing the opacity of the layer here. To delete the layer, just hit the trash icon to the right on this menu bar below. You can rearrange the order of your layers by clicking and dragging them around. If you hold down the Option key while you drag, you will duplicate the layer as you move it, consistent with some other tools. Notice the double arrows that Photoshop uses everywhere to show that you're doing a copy. If you hit Command J, it will duplicate the layer also. If you have an active selection and hit Command J, it will create a new layer with the copy of just the selected part. If you add the Shift key and use Shift Command J, it will cut the selection from the layer and create a new layer with just that selected part. This menu bar just above the layers allows you to lock the layers. You can lock just the transparency, brushing, moving, or all editing. Here the transparency is locked. Notice the icon on the layer. Now you can still paint on this layer, but you cannot change the alpha channel or the transparency of it. Like most UIs, you can select multiple layers using the Command key. And you can use the Shift key to select a range of layers. You can link layers by selecting them and right-clicking on one and choosing Link from the menu. This allows you to transform the layers as if they were one. Notice the link icon on the layers. You can unlink from the same menu. You can also group of selected layers with Command G. The group acts a lot like a layer, with name, visibility, opacity, moving, duplicating, etc. You can open and close the group with the twirly arrow. If it's pointing down, it's open and the layers in the group are indented. You can drag and drop layers into the group. They'll end up at the bottom. With multiple layers selected, you can merge them together into one layer by hitting Command E. With only one layer selected, Command E will merge it down with the layer below it. Okay, so on a big project you have a lot of layers and you want to make a change to something. You can find the specific layer it's on quickly by switching to the Move tool with V and then hold down the Option key and right-click on the thing you want to find. Photoshop will automatically select the top content layer at the point you clicked on. Or you can right-click to expose the stack of all layers active for the pixel under the cursor, and you can select from that list. So don't forget to name your layers. Let's talk about blend modes. So here we have a test layer with some paint or pixel values of red, green, and blue, RGB, the layer color. All the layers below this layer are combined to create a single color value for each pixel. Let's call that the bottom color. It's also just a red, green, and blue value. So when these two RGB values are combined, what should the resulting color be? There are a few different ways to combine these two pixel values together, and these are called blend modes. The default is the normal blend mode, which will create the resulting color's RGB value as somewhere between the bottom color and the layer color based on the layer's opacity. So if the opacity is 100%, the resulting color is entirely the layer color. If it's 0%, then it's entirely the bottom color. At 50%, it's halfway between the two. Okay, that's pretty straightforward, but let's look at some of the other blend modes. You can find the blend modes drop-down list here. I'm not going to get too deep into this here. I cover lots of different ways to use blend modes for various effects quite a bit in my digital illustration course. But here's a few things to note. If you look, you'll see that the blend modes are divided into groups. This group tends to darken the image, while these will lighten it. These will do a bit of both. These are the wacky ones, and these are the color-based ones. For example, the saturation mode will take the saturation of the layer color and apply that to the bottom color. These colors here were very saturated, so without changing the hue of the bottom color, it's just pumped up their saturation. Multiply will change the bottom color most if the layer color is dark, and will do nothing if the layer color is white. Screen is the opposite. It will change the bottom color most if the layer color is light, and will do nothing if the layer color is black. Overlay is interesting because it will both lighten and darken while making the middle tones transparent. Here you can see it with this 50% gray rectangle, that if I set the blend mode to overlay, it will disappear completely. You can easily cycle through all these blend modes to find the one you want by selecting the layer and using the shortcut Shift and plus or Shift and minus to move through the list. Blend modes are used in several other places in Photoshop, such as brushes, tools, fill, and even layer styles, which I'll get to in a minute. Did I just mention layer styles? Let's do that then. There are a lot of very common things that we want to do to a layer, like add a bevel, a drop shadow, an outline, a glow. In the old days, we used to create these things over and over again manually, but now we have layer styles. I've got a simple layer here to test out some layer styles. You can add a layer style to any layer by double-clicking on the layer thumbnail to bring up this dialog. Down the left side, you have your style effects, and for each effect you have its settings on the right. Simply check a box to turn that effect on. Click its name to see its options and edit the effect. There's bevel and emboss, stroke, inner shadow, inner glow, satin, color overlay, gradient overlay, pattern overlay, outer glow, and drop shadow. You can turn on as many as you like. I can't go through all the options, of course, but let's look at some common parts. All the effects use blend modes, which you're an expert with now. Some of these effects use lighting. You can change the light source with this thing by dragging the point around. Check this global light switch to link all the effects in your document to have the same light direction. For drop shadow, it's simpler to just click on the shadow and move it around. Let's look at outer glow. For several effects, you'll see a little color box. Click that to change the color. In this case, you can switch it to be a gradient. Patterns are great when used in a layer style because you can change the scale of it quick as pan. If you have a style set up that you like, you might want to save it by creating a new style. which will add it to your styles library. This button here will open up your styles library. To apply one of these styles, just click on it. You can use this as a starting point and then edit it from there. It's a really quick way to learn layer styles. Consistent with other Photoshop UI stuff, you can click this gear here to load or append style sets or to save your new styles. You can also manage your style sets using the preset manager I showed you in episode 2. Hit OK to apply the style. From the Layers panel, you can turn on and off the effects. You can also copy and paste styles between layers by right-clicking on the layer and using Copy and Paste Layer Style. Creating a mask. I use layer masks all the time, so much that a layer without a mask looks naked to me. A mask is a black and white bitmap that you can easily apply to a layer to control the layer opacity pixel by pixel. It'll make more sense in a minute. To create a layer mask, select the layer and then hit this button on the bottom menu bar. It looks like a rectangle with a hole in it. You'll notice that it adds a white thumbnail to the layer. That's your new layer mask. The areas in the mask that are white will be opaque, and the areas that are black will be transparent. So with all this white mask, there's no effect on the layer. But if you paint black on the layer mask, it will create transparent areas. What's cool about this is that you can use any of the imaging tools to create the mask. You can use any paint tool, you can fill with a pattern, use a filter, or paste an image, for example. In each case, whatever is white will be visible, and black will be transparent. If you hold down the Option key and click on the mask thumbnail, your canvas will switch to display just the mask. You can paint in this mode as well if you want to. Option key and click again to switch back. By right-clicking on the mask thumbnail, you get a pop-up menu where you can enable and disable the mask temporarily. You can delete the mask, and you can apply the mask. If you have an active selection before you create the layer mask, then the selection will be used to create the mask. What was selected will be white in the mask and therefore visible, and what wasn't will be black. And you can go the other way by command clicking on the layer thumbnail to create a selection from the mask. If you switch to the Move tool with V, you can grab this layer and move it around. Watch what happens if you unlink the mask by clicking this toggle icon between the two thumbnails. Now if you select the layer thumbnail, you can move the layer without moving the mask. Or, if instead you select the mask thumbnail, you can move the mask without moving the layer image. Another thing you can do that might not be so obvious is that you can also apply a mask in the same way to a group. Lastly, you can use a layer as a mask by creating a clipping layer. You do this by holding down the Option key and clicking between two layers. The bottom layer will then act as a mask for the layer above it. Do the same thing to undo it. Adjustment layers. We cover adjustments and transformations in the next episode, so I'm not going to go deep on this here, but I want to make you aware of adjustment layers. Adjustment layers are much like other layers, but they have no layer image. They will modify the layer stack based on which one you choose in its settings. You can use these to adjust colors or brightness or something like that, for example. To add an adjustment layer, you click the half moon button down here on the bottom menu bar. This will bring up a menu and let you select which adjustment you want to make. For example, the hue, saturation, and lightness one. Then you can adjust the settings in the panel that pops up. At any time you can come back to this layer and change these settings. You can also apply masks to these layers, just as any other layer. And that's pretty much it for basic layers. I know it was a lot of stuff to cover in one video, and if you've been at it for a while, you might want to give yourself a break, or at least a pat on the back. After a while, all these things will seem really obvious to you. In the next video, we'll go into adjustments in more detail, as well as cover other types of transformations and fills. Thanks for watching. And thanks for any likes, subscribes, or shares.